views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
On November the 5th, 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly went to Sutherland Springs First Baptist Church in Texas, opening up fire, killing 26 and injuring 20. This mass shooting is the fourth of the fifth worst gun massacres, the second deadliest following the shooting in Las Vegas that's occurred in America in just the past year and a half. And in the wake of this awful tragedy and mourning with the rest of the country, we'll discuss and try to get to the root of why we continue to see an increase in such vicious attacks in America. Is it gun control, or is it a mental health issue, or is it something deeper, perhaps something even more spiritual? That's next on this edition of Perspectives.
Let them know. What's on your mind? What's on your mind? Let them know.
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
And hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime, and of course, we invite you to stay connected to us. It's important that you stay connected to us, especially during this time, because we're trying to bring you news, information, and the things that you need to know from a different perspective. And you can watch us every week here on Channel 67. If you have Verizon Files, of course, it's Channel 33, and on the web at bronxnet.org. You can see some of the past episodes of the show. And then you can also hit us up on social media, Facebook and Twitter. You can get me on my personal page or personal professional page, Daren C. Jaime, and find out about what's the latest in the world of perspectives. And you'll get a unique and interesting perspective from me just about every day. And so stay connected to us, and we'll continue to inform you. Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we're talking front and center with the issue of the latest massacre, Sutherland Springs, Texas. As we said, 26 people dead, 20 injured, just going to a worship service. And when a sanctuary turns into a mortuary, a lot of questions still have to be answered. So please be joined by two very special guests in the studio. You've seen them here on Perspectives before, but somebody who could probably give us some context about several things that we want to talk about here today. William Devlin, Pastor William Devlin, president of Redeemed, an international humanitarian group that does work in war zones. He's also a member of the board of directors of International First Responders. He's a co-pastor of Infinity Bible Church and currently working on his doctorate. Also, he joins me along with Councilman Fernando Cabrera, who represents the 14th District of the Bronx. It's important to mention that he's just re-elected and getting 84% of the vote. The councilman is also the co-chair of the Gun Violence Task Force, but he serves also as the senior pastor of the New Life Outreach International right here in the Bronx. Whatever capacity he wants to join us in, he'll join us in here today. And we thank you both for joining us here on Perspective. Yeah. I think it's important that we have this conversation because as these mass shootings continue to happen, and I said it, a sanctuary turns into a mortuary. Yeah. Pastor, councilman, whatever you want to be today, there once was a safe place.
Yes.
There would be places that were off limits. And it's very clear, evident, what we've seen with Dylan Roof in South Carolina and now again in Texas. We even go back to the 16th Street bombings in Birmingham. The churches are now becoming an increasingly more target. Your thoughts, your feelings, you're a pastor of a church.
Well, I have a lot of feelings. I mean, I could put my government hat as a council member. I could put my mental health cap as I have my doctorate in counseling, licensed mental health counselor, former professor, or I could put my pastor's hat. And I tell you that it overlaps. So if we're going to talk about government, we need to do a better job when it comes to gun control. New York City is the perfect example of what could happen if we work together and with gun control. Most of the guns that are being used here in legal purposes come from out of state. They're not coming from the city. They're not being bought by people who have licenses, you know, to protect their business or whatever it may be. But also, there's a mental health component here. This man was a very bitter man. This man was a man full of resentfulness, which overlaps with the spiritual aspect. And so we need to do a better job in reaching people's mental health problems beforehand. There were red flags therein. Red flags that the media have been very good in pointing out that were signals indicating that this man had a serious case. When you have somebody stomping the head of their child, there's something very seriously wrong that attention needs to be given. In terms of the church, in terms of that boundary, that sacred place, I think part of that is because of the perception that has, and the tagging and the stereotype that has occurred throughout the years regarding churches. And those boundaries need to be restored. And also it's a place too, there, and think about this, it's a captive audience. It's the only place I could think of that on a weekly basis there is a captive audience. And it's there on a regular basis, so it becomes an easy target, very easy target.
And it becomes a place where you ask the question, have we lost our moral compass as America? I mean, we never would hear about this, never really talk about this it with such frequency and such fervor.
Yeah, we have, Daren, thanks for having us on today, and we have lost our moral compass here in America. Think about it. Here's a young man filled with bitterness, hatred, had some mental health issues. He gets a gun somehow, and then he walks into a church and kills 26 innocent people. In fact, he began shooting outside the church through the walls. What can we do to prevent this? There's no question that every church in America, every house of worship should have a security plan. They should have people stationed somewhere strategically that can protect the people that come solely to worship God and to give praise to God. But your question is correct. We have lost our moral compass. You look at what happened in Charleston. How is it that these men, seemingly with no conscience, this Dylan Roof in Charleston at the African Methodist Episcopal Church, can go in, sit through a Bible study, and then after they close in prayer, stand up and shoot innocent people? We're grateful that one of our international first responders, Pastor Dimas Salaberios, we dispatched him Sunday night, the night of the shooting. He was down in Sutherland Springs that night. The next morning was part of a press conference, but more importantly, he sat with the pastor and his wife, whose own 14-year-old daughter was murdered by this crazed individual, and he was able to console them. So I think all of us should be looking at gun issues, but we should also be searching our own hearts. And what do we do when we have people in our congregation that are filled with this bitterness, this hatred, perhaps racism, this rage? And how can we help those people and then deliver, from a community perspective, mental health help for those individuals?
And let me bring this in here. What do you say to your congregation, given the fact that you see this, you hear this experience? What goes on, and what do you go back to tell your congregation after watching such a vicious and heinous act?
And Daren, if I could backtrack a little bit here, because you serve as a catalyst for a thought here, which is, let me tell you what I think we lost. We lost a culture of honor. That's what's missing in our society today. There was a day you honor your teacher, you honor your parents. There was just, you gave them value. You honor a sanctuary. We need to restore honor. And this is why we see the way people are communicating today in social media and every form of media. We see it in our communities. This has to change, especially if we're going to give hope for the next generation. What do we tell our congregations? We tell them a couple of things. Number one, our hope ultimately is not in what happens here. Our hope is what has been prepared for us in the other side. Second thing is that we can make a difference. we could make a difference, and we need to identify people who are in a vulnerable state that might be in the same situation as this man who did this atrocious thing. We need to identify them, because everybody, you know, this is going to require everyone coming together and being alert, being watchful, and not to be afraid to speak up, not be afraid to reach out to people and to take a risk. We could take risks in getting involved in people's lives instead of saying, I'm not going to get involved in their lives. And third, continue to communicate that we are the hope of the world. We have the message that transforms. We have the message. Look, I have people in my church that they probably would have been dead today, or they would have had killed people. I mean, I think we all have those people in our church that have been transformed by this message of love and of hope that goes deep down inside their soul, and they change from the inside out. This is what this young man needed in his life, and unfortunately, the help was not there.
Let me go to break right quick and come back and continue our conversation with Pastor Cabrera and Pastor Devlin. We'll be back with more perspectives right after this.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Back here on Perspectives, continue our conversation talking about the recent mass shootings, particularly in Sutherland Springs, Texas, claiming the life of 26 people and 20 still remaining injured, one including a pastor's daughter amongst the deceased, the pastor not present at the church when the shooting took place. And talk to us from that perspective, because I think that's a unique perspective as well. Being a shepherd, and your sheep are literally being massacred, and you're not there, and one of those actually being your daughter. The mindset of Pastor Frank, and his name is Pastor Frank Pomeroy, and the things that he's encountering.
Well, we're grateful that one of our pastors on our International First Responders team flew down that night, and he was able to spend the entire day with Pastor Frank and his wife, just loving on them, just hugging them. And his report to us Monday night, the day after the shooting, was that this pastor and his wife, of course, heartbroken because they lost their 14-year-old daughter, but their faith is strong. Their faith is strong. And Pastor Cabrera talked about that. I mean, that's the hope of our faith, that this world is not the only place that we're going to be, that Jesus has promised a home in heaven, and by faith. And so when that pastor heard about the death of his daughter, and Pastor Dimas Salaberios went to minister to them, and his report to us is that their faith was rock solid. Heartbroken, losing their daughter.
Absolutely.
But their faith is strong, and that, of course, one family member or one family lost 8 members of their family. A 2-year-old was murdered that day. So obviously, they're going to be mourning the rest of their lives, but the report that we received is that their faith is strong. And anytime a tragedy has happened in a church like that, any church in America, people just have to look to God, and that's where their faith has to be rooted.
How do you tighten up on a situation like this? After an event like this, you know, how do you tighten up at home? Is there a revisiting of security measures? Is there more conversation? Is there a conversation?
Well, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm having that with my own church. You know, if you have the fortunate opportunity of having law enforcement church members, to be able to talk to them and to welcome them. I think it's sometimes pastors and clergy, they're like, well, God is going to take care of us, you know. But God gives us power, wisdom, skills, strategy, so we could take care of situation. And to be able to engage them, to have a security team that is celebrated. Number 2, that they're not looked down upon, because sometimes they just see them walking around and say, hey, we're doing all the hard work and you're just standing there.
Right.
But they are key, especially the larger the church, the bigger the potential, because the more potential issues that can arise. And also to have when situations like this happen, to have like a mental first aid team. In this situation, I would imagine the pastor is going to go through a lot of survivor's guilt. This sense that, why did I make it? Why wasn't I there? Pastors who do this from the heart, who are not hireling, but they do it from the heart, their heart says, I laid down my life for the sheep, and not to be there during that time, and thinking, if I was there, could I have done something?
Right.
That's what his biggest struggle, and I will hope that there will be wraparound services in that city to help him and the other survivors in the church.
Yeah, and you know, Councilman Cabrera was talking about restoring this culture of honor. The other item that we need to restore is a culture of engagement. You know, how many of us are removed from our communities, even from our churches? You know, people come in, and then they hear the service, and then they go out. You know, social media has done a disservice through Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, etc., that we'd rather talk to somebody through a screen rather than personally engaging people. And that's really what it takes, particularly in a community of faith, that we need to engage people, just walk, hey, how you doing? How can I serve you? How can I help? Everything going okay at home? That is the restoration of the culture of engagement. And I think particularly the generation coming up, those that we love and we call millennials, those are people that we need to train and teach. This is how you engage people in the church and congregation, not just your own age group millennials, but those who are older than you, those who are younger than you, and how can you help them?
What message do you send to people now after this? Because, you know, people are looking for a message.
Well, I think the message is one of, like you just mentioned, of engagement. Let's look out for those who are hurting. Hurting people hurt people. And we see here a classic case that went to a total depravity moment of the darkest kind, to be able not just to attempt to hurt one person, but a whole congregation. It was a form of revenge, and I wanted everybody else to hurt, and then ultimately he took his own life. I think that we need to target people, to look for people, to be attentive, and to know what the signs are.
Right.
I think that we need to do a better job in our congregations to teach and to train. That's our job as a pastor. Sometimes we think that our jobs are to deal with everybody else's problem. I don't think that's the job of the pastor. The job of the pastor is to train people so they could go ahead and do it. They multiply themselves and touch the entire community. The other thing that we could do is to tap into the resources that the city has. They could come in and to train us as well. And whether it's through the CERT program, whether it's FEMA, whether it's through the National Mental Health Institute, to get these resources to the pastors and to gather the pastors in the community, bring the mental health professionals, bring them in, and to be able to train the clergy and the leadership so they could train the congregation and to be able to reach out.
Take a quick break. We'll be back with more with these pastors when we return right after this.
Well, I got this as a paid internship. Spending my time here, I really enjoyed the people that work here. I enjoy what goes on behind the scenes.
So far, I've learned how to operate a camera, how to host. I learned how to control audio.
My first time hosting was really nerve-wracking, but I really enjoyed it because it was a new experience.
Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
And back here on Perspectives, a talk with Pastor Bill Devlin and Pastor Fernando Cabrera. And I think we were talking in the break a little bit about getting involved, and really bringing law enforcement involved. And I think we should just share that with people. You know,
as pastors here in the city of New York or anywhere in the U.S., don't be afraid to connect with law enforcement. That is what we would call community engagement. You know, churches sometimes like to live in isolation. They don't think of the police, the fire, mental health professionals, the government, but we need to see the church as really a lighthouse in the community. And the lighthouse should be drawing those in the community that can help: police, law enforcement, government, etc., mental health professionals, drawn to the church so they know and see the church as a place of help and engagement and community contact.
And before you jump in, I want you to, but I also want to think back to, there was a time when the church would say, we can handle this, pray, da-da-da-da-da. Now that's not the case. It's like we have to engage law enforcement because the need is so great, the culture, the climate has shifted.
And because the culture has changed and we don't have the level of honor that we used to do before, we're more vulnerable in society. And this is why it's important for church leaders to get to know personally their inspector, to be able to know their captain, their sergeant, the local police, so they could literally pick out the call. If they have a question, if something, you know, is in their mental radar, you know, discernment, to be able to say, no, there's something funny going on here, I can't put my finger on it. They could give advice. They're dealing with these situations all the time. And so they are able to, I think sometimes there's this hesitation. I'm going to seem like I don't know what I'm talking about. I might look like I'm crazy for bringing this up. But the police are literally asking for this type of information because they want to do as much preventive work as possible.
And every precinct in the city of New York and all 5 boroughs has a community council in a police precinct. So like I serve in the 4-3. I'm engaged with the community council there. If the pastor's too busy, then assign someone to be at those community council meetings so you can engage with the local police force, with the fire department, and then also with mental health professionals.
How beneficial has it been for you as a pastor to have that partnership with law enforcement?
Oh, for me, it's been huge because they know where our church is. Anytime we have an issue, we call, and they're there immediately responsive. They're very open to dealing with houses of worship.
For me, I've been able to call them at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. An issue springs up in the community, something that we could address before it becomes out of control, even dangerous. I think that they need our eyes, and we are their eyes in the community.
We got to leave it there. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing a little bit with us, and we continue to pray for the victims in Sutherland Springs, Texas, and then also for you guys as well who continue to be on the front line in many ways. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Listen, that about wraps it up for this edition of Perspectives. I'm Daren Jaime. We thank you for watching. Now, be sure to tune in to Perspectives every week on Bronx's Channel 67. As we said, you've seen the information at the bottom of the screen, how you can get in touch with us. For all of us here on the Center Perspectives, I'm Daren Jaime. Until next time we meet, take care and God bless.
Or a movement with a stable, no fables, you speak on your decisions, cause in the long run it's your voice, your views, your vision, keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light, cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund Reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
We are together. And for the last 20 years, we have been building on a vision to share our views, our voices on our channels. We are the Bronx. We are BronxNet.